So, Shannon, from a parent perspective, why is friendship important to you?
Friendship is really complex, but incredibly important because it helps children build self confidence and connection, a sense of belonging when they are created on core traits and values and some common interests. The reason why it's important to teach children about friendship is because they are very, very complex structures. And there's a strong motivation, I think, with most children to want to form friendships, to want to be included, to want to interact in a group dynamic, and a difficulty in understanding and decoding behaviour that is appropriate and healthy. A lot of the complexity with friendship is something that we learn through experience, um, through primary school, through high school, through university and work. And what we're trying to do, I guess, is decode some of the basic elements so that children have a bit of a better understanding about how they fit in a role of being a friend.
So, from my perspective, friendship and what it means to be a friend in general is one of those social skills that we very often just assume kids will pick up by themselves, especially in my day. So, what it felt like for me is even though I wanted to engage with the other kids, I didn't really know exactly how to do that. So from the outside, it looked like I was hanging back. It looked like I preferred to play by myself. It looked like I didn't really want to engage in the same way as the other children did. Whereas in reality, what was holding me back was the fact that I had no idea where to start or what to do, or my very real experience of the things that I tried not actually working.
For me, talking to my son about friendship was important because friendships provide emotional support. They can increase our heart and brain health and promote a positive outlook on life. They can reduce stress, but only if we're building friendships that are healthy. And I think that there initially was a tendency for my son to gravitate towards children with popular characteristics. So, children who were very good at something, or children who were naturally good storytellers or very entertaining. And while those skills are certainly admirable skills to have, they don't necessarily mean a good basis for friendship. So some of the characteristics of a good friend are traits like integrity and caring. The most important element of a friendship is that they value and respect you for who you are. And that's one of the things that doesn't necessarily come across in those characteristics that naturally draw you to somebody else in your peer group. So the skills that are important are reciprocity. So that if you're putting in care and effort and time, that you're receiving a little bit of that in return. That there's honesty and trust and reliability, somebody who's a good listener. Similar core values such as things like kindness and justice and how you should treat somebody else. They're very important values that you hold in common because they will allow you to make that connection. You can have similar and different interests. It's great to share something that you love with a friend, but it's also interesting to find out something that they really like that you may not have shared or experienced before. Overall, a friend should be somebody who is fun to hang out with and who is positive some of the time. And I think that's important. Friends should have a degree of flexibility, and that's probably one of the hardest characteristics for children to understand. That when you're reaching out and investing in a friendship, that sometimes that means that you don't go first. Sometimes it means that you sit back and listen when ideally you probably wanted to share something first. And that there are different types of friendships as well. It's unrealistic to expect that everybody will be your best friend. And it's unexpected as well to anticipate that everyone will like you. It's not a reasonable expectation. So it's important to understand that there can be acquaintances, that there can be sometimes friends or close friends or situational friends that you might build, say, in a sports team or on a particular group or shared interest. And that expectations and perspective are also important elements of friendship as well. And not everyone will like your shared interests or accept you for who you are, but there are people who will. But being good mannered and pleasant most of the time shows that you respect those core values and yourself enough to practice them, irrespective of the level of friendship that you have with
Mm.
someone else.
One of the most confusing things for me was that the how people would treat me would depend on the context of the situation. So I personally had no trouble making friends when it was one on one. That was a relatively simple social interaction for me. So I would know other kids one on one, and we seemed to be friends, or at least I thought we were. But then all of a sudden, we would go to school and we'd be in class, and there'd be other kids around, and they would suddenly start treating me differently. And I couldn't quite rely on our previous experience, which I now understand was in a completely different context. So it can be very helpful to understand that friendships evolve in a time and a place. So the friends that I play tennis with, for example, would not necessarily be my friends that I hang out with at school, and it's still useful and valuable to have those kind of relationships, so long as we understand their boundaries and limitations, and especially how relationships can change in different contexts.
I think it's important as well to look at behaviours that show that someone is not your friend. And this was a particularly important area as a parent for me because there is a social interaction and dynamic amongst a peer group where feeling popular or in control or appreciated may be more important than some of the more challenging characteristics of friendship, such as empathy, such as valuing and appreciating somebody as a whole. And also understanding that sometimes friends make mistakes as well. I think that's important to look at because then it also comes down to other characteristics that we've talked about before, like empathy and good communication. How do you forgive somebody who has taken personal information about you and made it into a humorous story to share with others when it's not their information to share? And that's where friendships become particularly complex. And it's important to teach children that if somebody is trying to make you feel uncomfortable and don't value or appreciate you, then they're not necessarily a bad person, but they're not a good friend. If they put you down directly or indirectly, and even worse is when that's disguised as sort of joking or teasing, or I'm just attempting to be funny. Making somebody feel uncomfortable isn't humorous. And I think it's important to share that information with children. And it's also important for them to know what they feel comfortable with. So if you trust somebody with personal information, you need to feel confident that they will care for that information. Friends don't show unpredictable or volatile behavior that makes you feel nervous or anxious. It's not a good friendship if there's little reciprocity, if they're always asking for things or asking for your time, but they don't offer the same in return. If they compare or rank other people or they try and change you, that's not positive friendship behavior either. If they don't take responsibility for themselves or their actions and they blame you for their choices, if they run up to you in the schoolyard and take your hat and throw it like a frisbee, and then they say, well, it was your fault because earlier on that day you teased me, That's not taking responsibility for who they are and their choices. Nobody made them grab your hat and turn it into a frisbee. Sometimes friends, especially in primary school, they can react negatively to success and popularity, or that they have a need for focus and attention. And while those needs are very real, it shouldn't be at the expense of your friendship. It's also very unhealthy, especially in those primary school levels where someone sort of sets an arbitrary goal or benchmark that you must meet to become friends. You've got to stay in this class or this sporting group, or you have to be able to achieve this level at Minecraft to be able to continue to be part of the group. Friendship shouldn't be transactional in that way. It shouldn't be a spreadsheet of positive and negative traits. And if anybody ever asks you to do something unsafe or unkind or dangerous to prove your friendship, then that behavior is particularly toxic. It's very controlling, it's very manipulative, it's not a healthy form of friendship. And I think, again, everyone has that motivation to feel like they belong, that they're accepted, that they have a forum that they can speak and share who they are. But we do need to look out for these unsafe behaviours and protect children from that, so that they are not vulnerable to negative types of behaviour.
So there are two sort of equal and opposite traps that we often fall into if we see friendship as a very black and white thing. So the first trap is to feel that because most people don't want to be my friend, if there is someone who is willing to speak to me, who is willing to spend time with me, then that's the only criteria. I have to be friends with this person because they're kind enough to say hello to me or to want to spend time with me. I know I personally made this mistake quite often, and it stemmed from a belief that I desperately wanted some friends and I didn't know what good friendship looked like. So I just grabbed onto whatever happened to come my way. Now, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing in terms of getting to know what a relationship looks like and what friendship looks like. But those learning experiences have to teach us what friendship looks like in the long run. The other equal and opposite mistake when we think about friendship in a black and white sense is to latch on to someone because they are a good friend or because they have been a good friend, and to get very upset when it feels like that relationship is changing. So, for me personally, it's a lot easier to reach out to an old friend and try and rekindle an old relationship than it is to seriously invest in a new relationship. Because, again, from experience, most relationships with most people don't go very well, or at least not very easily. They take a lot of work. So once we find someone who we really like and who seems to be a good friend, it's very easy to try and cling to that person and that relationship at the expense of trying to make new friends. So I think it's also helpful. It was also very helpful for me to realize the assumptions that I'd been making. If we don't teach children explicitly what friendship is, they're going to make assumptions. So I made the assumption, for example, that everyone else knew what to do, that everyone else knew how to be a friend and knew what they were doing. And actually, the real answer is that everyone else was just feeling around and treading lightly and learning from experience, and learning as they go. And the reason that I felt out of my depths is because I didn't have the experience and I thought I was supposed to already know what to do. If I had known that part of friendship, part of relationships in general is trying it out. How do I feel? What do I want to do? Do I like spending time with this person? How comfortable do I feel speaking with this person or doing a particular activity? And that's all part of the learning experience. I don't necessarily need to know in advance. And what I can do then afterwards is make a decision Do I want to continue this relationship? Do I want to try to invest in this friendship? Or maybe just because we used to hang out together doesn't necessarily mean that we would like to continue to work on our relationship in the future.